You're looking at what might be called Michigan's glamour fish. You can tell by the red stripe along the side. This is the most brilliantly colored fish of this species that we've had. Ned Fogel from the DNR, what is it?
Rainbow trout. What else?
Rainbow trout, there's no doubt. This is not a steelhead. It didn't migrate to the Great Lakes. It was in an inland lake, not a very large inland lake. And what county was it in, Ron?
Montcalm.
Montcalm County. Ron Long caught this, how big?
18 pound, 5 ounces.
18 pound, 5 ounce rainbow trout. What a story. But I tell you, I have almost a bigger story right inside this container. This is the bait that he caught this rainbow trout on. What do you call these?
Jumping jacks.
Jumping jacks.
Yeah.
And these are worms like you have never seen, but you're going to see them in a moment, so you stay tuned. It's Thursday night, time for Michigan Outdoors.
From the rugged shore and woodlands of the north, it's history of copper mines and iron ore, the Great Lakes fisheries. To the farmlands of the southern counties we'll look around again at all that waits the sportsman in the state of Michigan.
This is the fish, an 18-pound rainbow. How you holding up, Ron?
He's heavy.
He is heavy. He's a heavy-bodied fish. Before we get talking about the fish, I want to finish what I was saying about this bait. I have, for the first time, just seen this, and these are, they're not night crawlers, are they?
No, they're jumping jacks.
They're
Wormy
jumping
Joes.
jacks. Okay, now look at this, folks. We have jumping jacks in here. They look like regular worms, but watch this. Look at them go. Look at that one. These things go crazy. Just like Mexican jumping. Look at, oh, this is incredible. Jumping jacks, where did you find these?
Wormy Joes in St. John's.
Is that about the only place you can buy these in the state?
As far as I know.
Jumping
He's
jacks.
got the best worms going.
Holy cow. Well, we'll just sit them here, let them warm up, and they'll probably do a whole act right there. Jumping jacks, how did you hook them on the hook? Hook them once?
You got to hang on to them.
I'm having a terrible time with these things.
And I use a half-inch hook to hook them on, too.
A half-inch hook.
Salmon eagle,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's a story on jumping jacks, something I'm sure we're going to get a lot of letters and questions on. Let's talk about this fish. It looks like a heavy-bodied rainbow, Ned.
It is a very heavy-bodied rainbow. It's real typical of these large hatchery fish when they're in a lake where they got plenty of food.
So this fish probably came from a hatchery?
Oh, I'm sure it was a stocked fish.
Do hatchery fish grow bigger than the wild trout?
Usually not, because the wild trout go out into your larger lakes where there's more of a food supply, and they seem to grow a lot bigger. Fish are usually that way. The more food you give them, the bigger they get, especially if they get a good start early in their life.
Now, this lake that is in Montcalm County, you can read about it in our trophy book, in our Michigan Outdoors Club Digest. We won't tell it on the air right now. But this lake is how deep?
Oh, it varies about 50 foot to 100.
And how deep were you fishing?
About 50.
Was that on the bottom?
No, it's up about 3 feet.
3 feet off the
Yeah.
bottom was where this baby was lurking. What a trophy. Of course, you can tell it's a trout by the white mouth. And the coloration on inland fish is usually darker than the Great Lakes.
Usually it is. Usually you find those Great Lakes fish are quite silver until they get into the streams, then they darken up, and then they start developing the red stripe along the side.
How big a battle did he put up?
Well, took me about a half hour to get him in.
Really? What, were you using light tackle?
Yeah.
Got his
4
arms
pounds.
in shape for holding it here.
Yeah, I've been holding him about 15 minutes
Well,
now.
this fellow here, Ron Long, is a bricklayer, a mason, so you should be prepared. Tom, come on in here. We have Tom Wolf, the fellow who's going to mount this fish. Tom is our Michigan Outdoors Fish Taxidermist of the Year. Mounting trout like this is a little different than mounting bass and pike, the inland fish. They're oilier.
Oh, yes. Yes, they definitely have oil problems.
And the color, though, you have a good color to start with. Whoops, look at this right here. We have our crazy jumping jack right there. They're going nuts. Well, anyway, that's something. This is something, too, and this is an 18-pound, 5-ounce. Have you ever seen one this large come from an inland lake?
Not too many. That's a real nice fish for an inland lake.
The only ones I've heard of are Higgins Lake.
Higgins Lake. we've
And
gotten
Higgins
several.
Lake is not a run-of-the-mill inland lake.
No, it's
But
much
evidently-
larger and deeper.
Evidently, this one is neither. Well, Ron, a great story. Thanks for bringing us those jumping jacks.
They're on the floor.
They are right now. So Tom Wolf will get this baby mounted, and it'll make a beautiful trophy for you. We're going to start off our trophy report right now with with a rainbow trout that goes to the Great Lakes, which we call a steelhead trout. So let's go right now to our Michigan Outdoors Trophy Report. It's too early yet for the steelhead trout to run the rivers. They come in after the salmon, usually October and November, which is why this nearly 17-pounder was caught in Lake Michigan off Muskegon. The lure hanging from its mouth is a spoon called a billy bait, and Dennis Whaler from Grand Rapids caught this fish at 7 in the morning. These silvery rainbow trout that migrate from the rivers to the Great Lakes are known for their aerial acrobatics, exciting fish to catch. Not exciting to battle, but delectable under the broiler, this is a bottom dweller, quite the opposite in many ways from the steelhead. It's a lake trout, and at 16.5 pounds, it's a master angler fish, caught by young Dennis Rourke of Wayne. He used a Northport nailer at 7:30 in the evening to lure this lunker into striking in Lake Huron off the tip of the thumb. That's good Laker territory. The background view, by the way, is not the hills of Huron County. That's a mural on the wall. These aren't master angler fish, although the 3 being held are over 20 pounds. They're Chinook salmon caught off Frankfurt by Jeff Vogel, Alan Sebrarin, and Kevin Kuzera. These are the big fish that tug so hard in the fall that most Great Lakes anglers are looking for. And this is master angler size. The DNR has a 30-pound minimum, and this one qualified with 3 ounces to spare. Taken trolling in Lake Michigan off Manistee on a golden chrome J-plug at 9:30 in the morning at the end of July, Ellis Jones from Hazel Park is holding a real trophy, 38 inches long and 30 pounds of salmon. But here's one even larger, also caught off Manistee. This is 31.5 pounds, taken at 7 at night on a Dodger and fly. Lowell Brown from Fowlerville is a lucky angler, and see how dark this Chinook is? It apparently was one of the early spawners ready to move up the river. But here's the largest Chinook salmon we've seen come through the Master Angler program so far this season, 35 pounds even. Also taken on a Dodger and fly, but this one during noon hour. William Kenny from Rapid City caught it, and for those of you who think that Grand Traverse Bay has been fished out by the Indians, this 39-incher shows what's still out there. He caught it, as I said, during the lunch hour, and it's the biggest one we've seen so far. So let's make William Kenny from Rapid City our Michigan Outdoors Master Angler of the Week.
We sportsmen, for a long time, enjoy our hunts after they've taken place, and this is a chance for you to give them a hand. Taxidermists have gotten a rule promulgation into the Federal Register which would allow them to mount non-game species of animals, like birds of prey. They're very close. A lot of these species, by the way, are killed by cars, towers, that sort of thing, and right now it's a felony to possess them. But with this rule change, if you should hit a hawk or an owl or something with a car, you would be able to have it mounted by a taxidermist. Write or call me for the address to send your letter to, and I really want to hear from some sportsmen this week. Now, tomorrow night, there's going to be a hearing on the snagging bill. Representative Giese is introduced. That's going to be at the Ludington High School, and that will start about 7:30. And that's what's going on pretty much this week in the Outdoor Headlines.
One thing that we didn't touch on, though, Bob, of course, that we've been talking about a lot, is the Indian fishing controversy. People ask us about that all the time. What is the scoop?
Well, that's right, and we were supposed to have on somebody from the governor's office this week. Got a call late last night. There's an emergency meeting with Congressman John Dingell, Guy Vanderjagt, and also the Department of Interior. This thing now has taken on so many different fronts that it could go 3 or 4 different ways. However, the governor's office did say absolutely positively next week, you know, barring any sort of difficulty like they had this week, there will be somebody from the governor's office to talk about the issue.
Okay, very good. We can look forward to that. But, you know, we got a chance to talk with Ron Skoog, the new DNR director in the state. He takes his position when?
I think it's September 19th, but what an opportunity we had.
We did, and we want to share that with you. The day before yesterday, we talked with Ron Skoog, and here's an excerpt from that interview. So, but you've done more fishing in your life, or hunting, or?
Well, I don't know that as far as the time spent, I suppose you do more fishing. I've done more fishing because usually the fishing season is open a little longer than the hunting season. But in Alaska, of course, there's a lot of opportunities for both. And with long seasons, like our deer season runs from the 1st of August to the end of December, and you can take 7 deer, and it's a good way of getting meat for the locker. A lot of people in Alaska, of course, hunt and fish to put food in the locker. A lot of people just live off the land, and I was no exception. We rarely bought any beef or any kind of commercial
You must know
food.
some good recipes.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I'm a simple, though, gourmet.
Well, that's great. You know, you haven't seen our show yet, but we do a recipe, fish and game recipe, just about every week on the show. So maybe we'll get you in the kitchen. Would that bother you to be in the kitchen? The DNR director in the kitchen?
Well, when I said I was simple gourmet, I don't mean I'm a gourmet. I'm a
I
simple
know.
cook, you know. Just I'm an eater more than a cooker.
Well, those make the best
Well,
cook.
that's my qualification, too.
That's right. Well, what do you like to be characterized as? Ron Skoog, the hunter, the hellfire brimstone hunter fisherman advocate, the environmentalist, the diplomat.
How about resource conservationist? I'd like to go a little broader than what you're limiting me to, I think.
Would you?
My background is in the fish and wildlife profession, obviously, and that's where my time has been spent. But all of it relates to resource conservation, actually, and the use of our natural resources by man and the protection of the habitat and the environment. And so it all relates more than just hunting and fishing, obviously.
But you know the big difficulty you're going to have, I think, is not with the resources in this state, the natural resources, but with the people. With the
Well, that's what
sportsmen.
management is all about, you know. You speak about fish and wildlife management, and it's not management of fish and wildlife, birds and et cetera. It's really people.
Really? That's
The
great to hear
animals
this,
are not
isn't
the
it?
problem, it's the people. If you let them alone, they'll probably just do fine out there if it weren't for people. And a lot of management techniques are applied and without any concrete results. They probably, in some cases, for certain management programs, you do just as well or maybe even better if you didn't even have them, as far as the abundance of fish and wildlife is concerned.
Are you
But
ready?
not the people.
Are you ready to deal with the people we have here?
Well, I
We
think
have
so.
the Indian fishing on the west side of the state that's getting to. Well, you must have had that type of controversy in Alaska.
Oh, yeah. Of course, the big subsistence issue in Alaska has been one that's polarized an awful lot of people in Alaska during this whole Alaska lands disposal federal bill that came into place in December of 1980. That was a 4-year battle on that one, in which people on both sides, in which they invoked the subsistence priority, that anyone who be classified as a subsistence hunter or fisherman or person, which was usually, of course, anyone in the bush, but would be predominantly in Alaska, mostly Eskimos and Indians. Anyway, they had top priority over the taking all fish and wildlife. That any time there was any kind of a shortage or regulations restricting take were necessary, the subsistence hunter and fisherman was always given the top priority. That his needs had to be satisfied first, and that raised a storm up there simply because, as I mentioned a little earlier, everyone, or many people in Alaska, are in fact meat hunters, and they consider themselves subsistence hunting and fishing. That they're taking moose and caribou and catching salmon and whatnot for their locker for the table, and therefore they ought to be a subsistence person also. And people in the urban areas, of course, are very opposed to this whole subsistence idea, the subsistence priority, given special privileges to just one group of people in Alaska.
That was interesting, Bob. He's dealt with this same type of Indian fishing controversy on a little bit different level in Alaska.
And in some ways, it may even be more complex because of the diversity of the groups. But he kind of speaks softly and carries a big stick,
Well,
I've got the feeling.
He does speak softly. That's the first thing you notice when you meet him and talk with him. And I was impressed with his broad background, his knowledge, his resource
His
background.
candor, too, his candor.
But my question is, I had to come back and pop the question to him, was really with the problems we have in this state, with the people, the controversies, the cans of worms we have going on here and battles raging, why did he want to come to Michigan to head up this agency?
Well, it wasn't simply because of the great environment you have here, because Alaska's got a greater environment in my mind. You know,
We'll give him that, huh?
Okay, we'll let you have that.
You can't find a better place if you like the outdoors to be off by yourself if you want to. So Michigan, I'm very pleased though that it does have a good natural environment up here. And of course I grew up in Chicago, so I'm somewhat familiar with the area. And anyway, I like this part of the country. But the main thing was the great controversy that seems to be raging down here and the difficulties in people. And I enjoyed trying to deal with people. and I like exchanges, I like confrontations, and to me it was a real stimulating challenge, I felt. And as
Well,
part of my career, I felt it was something that would be a great thing to add to my career, to be here and deal with some different issues than I have in Alaska, and
you
try
know-
to provide some solutions.
Interesting, huh, Bob?
Oh, yeah, just...
For such a low-key guy, I was concerned that our new director was going to be too low-key, too mellow, to get into the can of worms and the fracases we have here in this state.
I don't have that concern at all
No.
after talking to
No,
him.
no, and we did more on that interview, which we're going to share with you in the coming weeks. Ron goes on the job when?
I believe it's September 19th.
Excuse me, I just called our DNR director, Ron, but he told us, he says, call me Ron, call me Skoog, call me the director, but don't call me Dr. Skoog. He says another thing, when he comes back on this show, he's not going to wear a coat and tie like he did. He hates ties, he says. He's going to wear a sports shirt, hunting and fishing shirt like the rest of us.
Don't you get the feeling, although he's a professional problem solver and natural resources man, that he's kind of like to rather be out there hunting and fishing than he would?
Absolutely. I think, sportsman, you're going to love him.
That's my impression.
That's my
too.
impression, too. So we're going to have more on that. He won't be able to be at our club council meeting September 12th. He'll be driving back from Alaska, but he assured us in October or November at his next opportunity he'll get in front of the clubs, and we'll be able to get him back on and answer your questions.
Great guy.
But right now, let's change gears a little bit. We're going to go into a recipe, a trout recipe, and it calls for a small trout. And let's take a look at what it would be like to catch a trophy-size Michigan brook trout.
The brook trout, known to every northern schoolboy who wets a line, is appropriately Michigan's state fish.
A great fish to catch, and that was larger than a lot of them you catch in small streams, Ed.
Yeah.
Now, that film that you just saw, that was from Wet, Wild, and Willing, a film from the Department of Natural Resources. You can rent it for your club or group from the DNR INE division. Now, what do you do with a trout you catch like that?
Well, I happen to know that you're going to poach it here.
I'm going to poach it. I'm going to poach it after I catch it, and we have a recipe coming up. It was done a few years ago. Bob Bishop did the photography in a cabin in the North Woods on opening day of trout season. Here it is, poached trout. Now, this method of cooking, Ed, is not really an American innovation. It's something that's come from Europe, France, really. And poaching is, well, similar to the fish boil recipe we had on a couple months ago.
That was very popular, by the way.
Oh, a lot of people like that, and I think they're going to like this recipe, too. What I'm showing you here is not exact ingredients. You might want to jot them down. This is a basic poaching recipe. We have a green pepper, an onion. We'll chop those up. Some cheddar cheese soup. This will be for the sauce. Have some peppercorns. We're just going to use a few of them. Thyme is the only real spice we're going to use. A carrot. These will all go into the broth, except the cheddar cheese. And something else that is very important in poaching, at least traditionally, is white wine. We use a good Michigan wine here right now. We're going to also have some vinegar. Vinegar is used in various ways in poaching recipes, but we're going to do a simplified version. We're going to also use a simplified pan right now. You can do small trout or small fish in a frying pan. They make special poaching pans, which are like roasting pans with a rack on the bottom, but we're not going to go to that length right now since we're just showing a basic poaching recipe. But what I'm doing is measuring out, really, the amount of broth we're going to need. I'm going to get some, put the fish in the pan. Now this is only for measuring purposes because I don't want to get too much broth. And I'm going to make the mixture here with the wine and the water. Some people put 50-50. I don't.
And you put about 70-30.
70-30. Well, if you like the taste of wine, you can put more. Some people put a lot of wine and some people put less. It's all up to your individual taste. We have that wine-water mixture. We take the fish out, now that we have our basic broth measured. Now we're going to add some ingredients to the broth. Again, cook's choice. What the recipe I got a hold of recommends is chopping up some onion. You use spices and ingredients that, really add a flavor to the broth. This will almost sound like a soup recipe. Take a green pepper, chopped up, add to the onion. Mix that in. Some of the poaching recipes are not complicated, but they do involve quite a few ingredients. Put some carrot in there. One of the essentials, well, some spices here, a couple peppercorns, and then we're going to put in a pinch of thyme. And that's really about all I'm using in this one, just a basic recipe. But an essential thing in poaching fish is having fresh fish. Now it can be a frozen fish, but a fish should not have any smell when you hold it right up to your nose. You shouldn't be able to smell it at all. That's the type of fish I like to eat. Of course, that's one advantage of sport fishing. You can have fresh fish. But we'll light the stove here, and I know I have a fresh trout. Going to simmer these ingredients for about 20 minutes on the stove to get that broth going. Now, in France, one way they do this is they do it almost like lobster. They keep their fish live in the stream. The way people take a live lobster and drop them in the water. It's called bluing a trout. Poaching and bluing. And what they'll do is they'll drop the fish. It'll be dead, but recently killed. Drop it in this vinegar mixture mainly, and the fish skin will turn blue.
Now, have you cleaned this fish, Fred?
It's field dressed. The gills are out and the entrails are out. You can cut the head off if you want. Something sort of traditional about leaving the head on a trout. Once the water is boiling, we want to cut it back to simmer, where it's sort of a slow, it's just bubbling, it's sort of twitching, not boiling hard. And we're going to put the trout in there for 10 to 20 minutes. You really can't mess up a recipe like this. Poaching, that's an advantage. It isn't like frying, where you have a real danger of overcooking and burning and getting it mushy. But while that is poaching, we're going to take a little bit of the broth, baste it over the top. See, actually, there should be a little more broth in there than that. But we're going to take the cheddar cheese soup, add, couple tablespoons of the broth, and mix it up, and we're going to make the sauce that goes onto the trout. Two aspects of poaching. One is the broth, the bouillon, court bouillon as it's called, that the fish steeps in, poaches in, and the other is the sauce. A lot of people use a hollandaise type sauce with poached fish. But it's a simple recipe. The skin will come right off of there, by the way. There's also ways of cooking this by wrapping the fish in cheesecloth, depending on the size, but I tell you, it's an elegant recipe.
I see you're dressed for the occasion.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Look at that. Garnish it with maybe some new little potatoes and some parsley. Serve it with asparagus, watercress salad. Ooh. You can get this recipe. We'll send you the basics of fish poaching if you write to us here at Michigan Outdoor. And we will send you our Club Digest, and we have right on page 15 here, that recipe for poached trout, along with a lot of other information and news. Our trophy book, that's where you can find out where the big fish are caught. We don't reveal on the program here, but we do tell in the digest. A lot happening this weekend, so you get out there and enjoy it. Maybe we'll see you outdoors. If not, next Thursday night, right here.
And sometimes when the moon brings out the diamonds in the snow, and the stillness of the forest lies encased in Arctic cold, the wind might whisper through the trees, listen if you can, it tells you of the beauty in the state of Michigan.